Welcome, 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 everybody. Gonna get started in about a minute or so here. Welcome. Slides are already up and ready to go. All right, guys, it is 2:25. For the sake of everybody's time and schedule, good afternoon. It's the afternoon. But anyways, it is 2:25. For the sake of everybody's time, I'm going to go ahead and get us ready to go and begin. So we're still talking about Manifest Destiny, but we're going to talk about a different thing, a major effect / cause, kind of, depending on how you look at it. And we're going to get into the different ways to look at it soon. The Mexican-American War. So we're going to talk about the causes and the effects of the Mexican-American War, and then we're going to tie it back into Manifest Destiny. So 2 minutes on the clock, key terms, objective, and then get ready to kind of tell me in the chat box, like nuke that chat box, what is Manifest Destiny? Get ready to answer that. Don't answer it yet. I want you to answer it after the timer goes off, but get ready to answer that. 2 minutes on the clock to get your notes ready to go. About, lost my timer for a second, a minute till we get ready to start. Remember, have the answer ready. What is Manifest Destiny? Don't answer it yet, but have it ready. Okay, about 20 seconds. So go ahead and start answering that question. You can either send it privately or you can just put it in the chat. What is, there we go, nuking that chat box. Expand west, belief that God wanted Americans to expand west. You got to remember that, right? God said we could do it. You got to remember that. God said we can do it. Manifest Destiny, sea to shining sea. That's a good vocabulary term. It's a, oh man, I almost, remember, it's not a policy. It's a belief. It's an idea. Good, good, good. God bless America. Pretty much. I mean, God told America, right? Or God said America could. Okay, so keep filling in those answers. If you haven't gotten your answer in, make sure you get your answer in. So that way it's on the transcript. But let's go ahead and get started, right? So we're going to talk about the causes and effects of the Mexican-American War. A couple of names, couple of events, and a couple of like summarizing descriptions. Okay, so let's get into this. Objectives there. First thing you got to know, and yes, you got to write it down. President James Polk, James K. Polk, 45 to 49. Jacksonian Democrat. If he's a Jacksonian Democrat, what does that probably mean about him? Who's probably a big fan of him if he's Jacksonian? Who does he like to appeal to? What type of person? The people, right? Like the regular people. Farmer Joe, Farmer Jane, he appeals to them. Common people, right? So he's a Jacksonian Democrat. He's a slave owner, and he's an ardent expansionist. And what that means, ardent expansionist, right? He's desperate to expand, and he doesn't apologize for it, and he's going to do it. It's his whole platform, right? A platform's like a president goes and runs, and they say, my plan is to do this. Yeah, Gio, one term. So his platform, his whole platform, Manifest Destiny. That's it. I'm going to finish Manifest Destiny, right? God said we got to get there. I'm going to get us there. That's his whole platform. He wants an independent national. He basically just wants the country to be well off on money. He wants to lower tariffs. Common people want that. He's going to get Oregon. He's going to get to California. That's it. That's his whole game plan. And the funny part about it is he's going to pull it off. It's a very short, simple game plan, and he's going to pull it off. For Oregon, you get that slogan, 5440 or fight, which is like way up into Canada. Forgot the word, compromise, is that the 49th parallel. That was on notes yesterday, but good to get it. Reminder, he's the one that did that, Polk. And then Polk will be president during the Mexican-American War. In fact, the whole war basically takes place during his presidency, from 46 to 48. And we'll get into the war in more detail today, but you need to know Polk. Polk's one of those presidents that you got to know. Even back in 8th grade, you had to know him, right? Like we're going to talk about presidents that you didn't really need to know, but you definitely need to know that. Janessa, he very well might be. Hard to say. Probably. A lot of those Jacksonian Democrats back then did that, though. It's kind of what made you a Jacksonian Democrat. You appealed to the regular people, and you were a slave owner. We'll do another minute, and then we'll move on. If you need more time than a minute, let me know. Just quick info about Polk. As we're coming in, guys, just a quick reminder as you're getting this stuff down. If you're not in AP Classroom, for my class, you need to get there. And if you go and fill out the Google form and screenshot your AP Classroom screen with my class there, I'll give you extra credit on a exit ticket. Basically, I'll replace one. So if you didn't do one, or if you got a really low score on one, I will replace it with that. So make sure you get that done if you haven't done it. And even if you've already done it, even if you registered for AP Classroom right away and you want that extra credit, just go screenshot it so that way I have it confirmed. And there's the Google Docs there in the Teams. I'll tag y'all in it at the end. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Key point 1. The Mexican-American War was a conflict. Obviously, more time? Okay, let me go back. Do another 30 seconds. Okay, we're going to move on now. All right, so short key point. I'll give you a quick 90 seconds. Mexican-American War, conflict, fight between the United States and Mexico, from the years 1846, 1848. You can literally just put the Mexican-American War was a fight between, the U.S. and Mexico from 46, 48. So again, quick minute and a half for key point 1, short key point, then we're going to get into the actual conflict. We're not going to talk too much about the fighting, but we will talk a little bit about it. We're just going to get into a short war. It's at a weird point in both countries' development, whereas one country is really, really, really rising, and another country has been really, really, really stagnant for a long time. And so we'll get into all that stuff. About 45 seconds. Make sure you have this first key point down. "30 seconds. All right. Let's go ahead and move forward. So, annexing Texas. Before you start writing everything word per word, in 1845, Texas was annexed by the United States. Mexico considered Texas a part of the country. So when the annexation happened, there was a huge, huge border dispute for a few reasons. So if you look at the map, the Nueces River, which flows right about here, is where the border was, I'm sorry, right here, is where the border was supposed to be, according to Mexico. According to Mexico. Now, you know that the Rio Grande is the border today, and that's because the Texas Republic claimed the Rio Grande, even though they really didn't have anybody living there. That's besides the point. So the border dispute's already happening. And when the border dispute's happening, and then the U.S. annexes Mexico, the Mexican government will see this as a hostile action, right? Because Texas was not an independent country according to Mexico, even though they had already fought the Texas Revolution. So problems, tension, and it's going to get worse. So what do you need to get on this slide? You need to get the date that Texas was annexed, and you need to get that Mexico is not happy when Texas gets annexed. And then you need the whole thing about the border disputes. You need to know the names of the rivers. Basically, Mexico claimed just south of San Antonio, everything up to just south of San Antonio. And the United States and Texas claimed down to the Rio Grande. So the Nueces River, you need to know the names of the rivers. So I'll give you 2 minutes for that one. That one's important. And then we're going to move forward. So this is the first big cause of this conflict. There will be more. Took about 9 years for Texas to be annexed. Anybody want to tell me why Texas wasn't annexed before? What issue would have been affected probably too much? If you just add a new state randomly, a new southern state, slave state. So that's half of it. You're right. But what about it? What about slave states? What about slavery? What's in jeopardy if you just add another state? Not quite the war. The balance between free states and slave states, right? The representation in Congress between slave states and free states. That's why it's usually done in pairs. So keep that in mind. And the reason that it's not going to be a big deal here is because added, war, new land, it's going to be a whole thing. But usually that's why they're added really close together, the states, to avoid that. So good remembering that. Okay, we got about another 45 seconds to a minute. If you need more time than that, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the next slide. About another 10 seconds. Getting ready to move on. So if you need more time, let me know because we're about to move on. More time? Okay. Do another, hopefully another 30 seconds is good. All right, let's move on. So, border disputes, troubles, war is going to start. Basically, here's what's going to happen. There's going to be a border dispute. People are going to be arguing about where Texas starts and where Mexico starts and where they end and all that stuff. So President Polk will send troops into the disputed area, not just into Texas, into the disputed area. And they're going to go out and they're going to patrol. And depending on the source you read, you'll get different reports of like the American troops riding really close to Mexico and kind of like trying to pick a fight, or you'll hear reports of the Mexican troops doing that. What probably happened, and you know, from what I've read and what probably happened is somewhere in the middle where both sides are kind of riding really, really close on the border, making their presence known, kind of declaring themselves. And for some reason, there was an exchange of shots. And a couple of Americans were killed, a couple of Mexicans were killed, but there will be an incident. It's a small skirmish. The two sides will exchange fire. And Polk, what's Polk's number one goal?
Expansion.
Expansion. Claiming territory, westward expansion, finishing Manifest Destiny. He wants California. Who owns California in 1846?
Mexico.
Mexico. Thank you, Gio. So Mexico owns California. So Polk will use this. He will take this incident and he will use it. He will expertly weave it to get everybody angry at Mexico. He will say they spilled American blood on American soil, right? Imagine the president in Independence Day from that movie in the 90s. Like just, he makes all these speeches. He's petitioning Congress and Congress will authorize war with Mexico. So in 1846, bam, war. So you need to know about the skirmish between Mexican and American troops on the border. And make sure you put in there somewhere it's in the disputed territory. It's in the part that no one can agree on. And you might want to write that line that Polk uses down, spilled American blood on American soil. You can find that transcript somewhere. We might actually look at it later on in the week. So about a minute and a half on here, then we'll move on. 30 seconds. Okay, let's move on. So the war will start, but there will be some opposition. People like Lincoln will be opposed to the war because they will kind of basically like radical, they're not radical Republicans yet, but Northern Republicans will see the war as a way to expand slavery because of the territory they're fighting over and because of what Texas will be. And so they are not happy. On top of that, you will see transcendentalists, because they're pacifists, like Henry David Thoreau, also oppose this. And Thoreau will famously refuse to pay his taxes. Like, no, that's not Lincoln, that's Thoreau. He will famously refuse to pay his taxes. He says that they are meant to support the war. It will support slavery, and he's not going to do it. He went to jail out of this protest, right? And that protest is like, that's a form of civil disobedience. So you need to know there was opposition from all over the country. You need to know that the name of Henry David Thoreau, which you've already written, Transcendentalist Thoreau, refused to pay taxes and was thrown in jail for it. You need to know those two things from this slide. I'll give you about 2 minutes to get that. About so much time we got left. About a minute, and then we'll move on. I don't see the Ellen thing. I don't know how you guys do. The guy's got a beard. So it's like a mutton chop beard too. About 20 seconds. The last thing I need is y'all writing in your LEQs. Ellen opposed the Mexican-American War. No. More time? Okay, we'll do another minute. It's the eyes and the nose. One more minute on this slide. Make sure you get the info down because it is important info. I don't see it. You're only saying Lincoln because of the beard, though. That doesn't, and that's not even like Lincoln's beard was full. Like this guy, like specifically doesn't have it on the chin for some transcendentalist reason. I believe it's a fashion statement. Maybe they do. All right, it's been about a minute and change. We're going to move on. So don't write all of this word per word. Do not write all this word per word. This is not a military history class. But the military history fan in me would not really, like, I can't talk about this and not talk about the war at least a little bit. So I'll tell you the very specific lines you need to write just so you know the course of the war and what happened. And then I'm just going to talk about it for a few minutes. Basically, what you have here is a 2-year conflict where nothing went wrong for the United States, nothing major, and everything went wrong for Mexico. Part of that is that Mexico was not used to fighting powers, strong powers, what you would call. Part of that is because the United States Army at the time was kind of trained. They were having a lot of wars with Indians and things like that they were able to kind of be well up on. Part of that was technology. Part of it was the formation and just the overall systems in place that the Americans used. And part of that was also just not chance, but just the way wars go. Some things go wrong, things go right. So most of the wars fought in Mexico. There are very little conflicts, and most of them are skirmishes in places like Texas and California. That would happen in what we would consider the United States. A general by the name of Zachary Taylor is the one that drives the Mexicans out of Texas completely. You guys know Texas Rangers. They are not quite police back then. They are just Rangers. They're crazy people that go out and fight Indians. And Texas Rangers were basically like cavalry scouts during this conflict, and they were really instrumental in fighting. They were really good at fighting because they spent their time fighting Comanches. So a lot of like famous Comanche fighters that are really good war fighters. No, not the baseball team. Were really good at fighting normal soldiers. Normal soldiers didn't know how to fight. They fought dirty, essentially. They fought like Comanches did, the Rangers, so that helped a lot. Then you got a guy named Winfield Scott who's sent from New Orleans to invade central Mexico right here. He captures coastal cities, and then he captures the capital. Once Winfield Scott catches the capital of Mexico, Mexico City, the war is pretty much over. For Mexico, it's a disaster, defeat after defeat after defeat after defeat. They lose their capital, and they lose all the ground they have to stand on. So Mexico was unwilling to like try to sue for peace early on. They were unwilling to ask or to say, hey, chill, we're sorry. They were unwilling to say, why don't we just set up the border at the Rio Grande and then we stop? Like they didn't want to do that. They thought they could win. They were very confident and a little arrogant in assuming that because they were losing pretty badly. And by the time they lost their capital, they just have to agree to the U.S. The U.S. literally took over the whole country, kind of. At least the government. They took over the government. So what you need to write here, and I'll give you a quick time, just know that for the U.S., it was a string of victories in the north and in central Mexico. And then for Mexico, it was a disaster, just defeats. And once their capital was captured, they had to give in to what the United States wanted. So once Mexico City, the capital, was captured, they had to give in. There was no middle ground anymore. They didn't have any bargaining chips. They couldn't be like, okay, well, we'll give you Texas, but we'll keep. They didn't have anything. They had to agree to everything that America and Polk wanted. So I'll give you a quick minute and a half to get that. I'm pretty sure. Like a lot of these generals are pretty Texas famous. Zachary Taylor is one of them. These early U.S. generals that are like pre-Civil War generals, kind of. Oh, well, there you go. So again, about a minute and a half. What do you need? You need to know that the conflict is victories for the United States, defeats for Mexico, and then once the capital is captured, Mexico has to give in to American demands. Side note, because I like making fun of California, This is the conflict where California pretends to rebel and declares themselves a country for like 10 minutes, which is why they have that California Republic flag, even though they were a country for like 10 minutes. Maybe not literally, but might as well have been 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to move on. We're going to move on. Remember, you shouldn't have written that whole thing down. A lot of that's not really important. If you want to read up a little more on this, your textbook has a little section about it, but again, it's brief. This isn't where we're going to get into. We'll get more into the Civil War and actually talk about specific battles and stuff, because this conflict does not last long. It's a very fast one. So let's move on. End of the war. What ended the Mexican-American War? Somebody type it or tell me. Either one. What ended the Mexican-American War officially? You can type it in the chat or you can tell me. What ended the Mexican-American War officially? The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Yes. And with that treaty, the disputed area, which was claimed by Texas, is now a part of the United States, as well as this whole chunk of land that includes like 7 states called the Mexican Cession. So in 1848, the U.S. gets the Mexican Cession. In 1845, the U.S. claims Texas. But so this is a huge, the only chunk of land that we get that's bigger than this is the Louisiana Purchase. So big, big deal. Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, 1848, ended the Mexican-American War and gave the United States the Mexican Cession, or granted the United States Mexican Cession. So I'll give you a quick, not even 30 seconds. We're going to move on soon. Again, Mexican Cession, 1848, Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, 1848. Ends the war. All right, key point 2. The United States added large territories in the West through the victory in the Mexican-American War and through negotiations, raised questions about status of slavery, American Indians, and Mexicans in newly acquired land. So basically, now we have a problem because the U.S. gets a whole new chunk of land, and there's a problem. What do you do about slaves? What do you do about the natives that are living there? And what do you do about the Mexican people that are living there? There are a whole bunch of issues. We're not going to talk about them all today. We're only going to mainly focus on the slavery issue. But there are problems, and they will be problems for a while. It's not quite going to accelerate the path to the Civil War, but it is going to be another step in that direction. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'll give you a quick 2 minutes, and then we will move on to the next section. A little bit more time, then we'll move on. About a minute and a half. About 35 seconds. If you need more time, let me know. If not, we're going to move on very soon. All right, guys, let's move on. The Wilmot Proviso. You need to write this down. A guy named David Wilmot proposes a bill in Congress that will forbid and end slavery. Not end, I shouldn't say end, but will prevent and forbid slavery in the new territories that were acquired from Mexico, meaning Texas, meaning the Mexican cession, meaning that it would only keep slavery in those southern, like antebellum states. That's the only place slavery would be allowed. He did try, and it would be prevented in the other place. And he had a lot of support. A lot of what will be known as radical Republicans tended to support him. Wilmot Proviso will pass the House, right? So remember, we have a two legislative system, right? We have the Senate and we have Congress. Congress votes on something, it gets through Congress. I just realized you can't see my other hand. Gets through Congress, goes to the Senate. Then the Senate votes on it. If it goes to the Senate and it passes, it goes to the president. If the Senate stops it, it stops there. The House will pass this bill twice, 85-80, both times. But it will be delayed and it will be killed and defeated by the Senate. The impact, well, it infuriated Southern slave power. Basically, every single Southern Democrat, every single Southern slave owner was angry and furious. How dare you try to stop the spread of slavery? And it fractured Northern Democrats. So back then, there were still Democrats in the North, but this will split them. So you're basically Northern Democrats that were opposed to slavery, because there were some, decided to not be Democrats anymore. And a bunch of the Northern Democrats that were in favor of slavery were now more aligned with the Southern Democrats, the Jacksonian Democrats. And it's a big point because, again, Republicans aren't a thing yet. There's still Whigs. But I keep saying Republicans because very soon, you're going to see the birth of that Republican Party. Those guys like Lincoln, the guys like Thaddeus Stevens, the like OG Republican, radical Republican guys are going to start coming up. And they're going to start coming up because of this. Because this is going to get murdered by the Senate. So you need this whole slide. I'll give you about 3 minutes for it because it's important, and you need to write it. You need to pretty much get everything on there. You don't have to format it like this, so if you want to just put it in a big chunk, you can. If you have questions, let me know. You do need his name, David Wilmot, Wilmot Proviso. No. That's not dates, Jay. Those are the number of votes. So the House vote, the vote in Congress was 85 to pass for yes, Wilmot Proviso, 80 no. But in the Senate, they stopped it. Those aren't dates. Don't put 1885. It's just the vote, the numbers of the vote, 85 to 80. And again, this kind of basically kills Democrats in the North. By the time the 1850s and 60s roll around, the North is all Republican and the South is all Democrat. Civil War-ish, right? Sounds a little Civil War-y. They're not split anymore. And that's a little later, but this is a big thing that makes that split happen. It's a big dividing point. About a minute and a half left. If you need more time, let me know, because again, you do need all of this. This is really important. So again, the 85 to 80 is just, I did something, is just the vote. It's not a date. Jay, I don't understand your question. Maybe you rephrase it a little bit. Oh, one-on-one LEQ, the help. Sorry. Yeah, no, I know what you mean now. So I was going to talk about that right now. So I'll talk about it now while we have some time while you guys are getting this down. So I planned it for today, and I was going to plan it for a good hour today. And I forgot I have meetings today. I forgot that there's faculty meeting, and then I forgot that I have a AP, like a humanities meeting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up for tomorrow. They're all graded already. I haven't put them in the grade book because, you know, it's a little depressing to look at. So I haven't put them in the grade book, but they're all graded. So we're going to, if you want help on them tomorrow, starting at right after class, I'm going to open up a Zoom and I will help you one-on-one. If you want help, I'll go through your LEQ. I'll tell you what you did right and what you did wrong. Because even some of you that I gave full credit on it for, none of them were perfect. I did not read a perfect LEQ. I read some really, really good ones. Do not I read some good ones. I read some great ones, but they could all use a little bit of help. And I think a lot of the reason for that is because this digital stuff, like we're not practicing the way we would normally. So I urge you, I beg you, if you want help, if you want to do well on this exam, you need to come by to that one-on-one. And I apologize for having to move it, but it'll start tomorrow. And if I have to do it all week, we'll do it all week. If I can only see a couple of people a day, it's really important that you get that feedback. So I'm willing to put that time in so that way we can do that. So it'll start tomorrow and I'll do it the rest of the days of the week if I need to for as many people that need help. So can you fix the LEQ for a better grade? Yes. If you bombed that LEQ, I'm going to want you to fix it. A lot of the responses I got, guys, were really short, like a little paragraph. And an LEQ is supposed to be an essay. So if you did that and you know you did that, we're going to have issues. Now, I had at least one or two people where it cut off mid-sentence, and I'm assuming that was Illuminate's fault, not yours. But even if it was your fault, if you just didn't finish because the time stopped, like that's, you know, we got to work on that. And some people had blank ones. And at least one or two of you contacted me on Teams and said that it went blank. But so we'll work on that. But for the most part, a lot of us were putting really short responses. You can't do that. That's not going to help. That's going to hurt. So we will get into that. Also, we're not answering prompts correctly. But again, that's on a case-by-case basis. Starting tomorrow, when class ends, I'm going to have a separate Zoom. And most of you are going to be in the waiting room. And then one at a time, I'll bring you in here and we'll talk about your LEQs if you want it. I recommend you do it because there is not a person in here who can use a little bit of help. Yeah, see, that happens, though. That's why we got to manage our time because that'll happen on the AP exam. And on the AP exam, you get a chunk of time for the whole written section. So you don't want to be where you're running out of time. You don't want that. So we got to manage how to write it. You got to be precise. You got to be specific. It's why you got to write it off of your head. So we'll work on all that stuff and we'll talk about what you can do to practice more. So don't worry, but yeah, it happens. So we will do that. That's time. Does anybody need more time on this slide? If not, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Okay, so that was the last slide. So give me 1 second while I post the exit ticket. And the slides, I forgot to post the slides. That's my apologies. I will post those as well. So it's a really easy exit ticket today. We have a little bit of extra time, which I was not expecting. But again, starting tomorrow, one-on-one, LEQ, breakdowns, tips, tutoring, whatever you want to call it. It's the closest thing I can do to give you feedback. And moving forward, when we have FRQs on exams, I think what I'm going to have you do is fill it in on a Google Doc so that way you have it saved, because then it messes up, because I think that's what's happening with some people. So the exit ticket is up. Let me pull it up here. By the way, guys, I'm seeing a lot of missing exit tickets. Make sure you get those submitted because they count. They're grades. And I'm putting in grades, and on Google Classroom, if it's a 0, it's going to end up being that in the grade book. Remember, every week of exit tickets counts as a full grade in PowerSchool. And if you're missing stuff, like I said, show me that you're registered in AP Classroom, and I will replace one of the Power School exit ticket grades, which there will be 3 by the end of the week. So exit ticket's really simple. Again, label the map. Don't use your notes. Using your notes doesn't help anybody. All right. Again, the map is more for practice. Fill it in, and you get credit for filling it in. But try to do it off of memory. It's important to learn these. Eventually, we're going to add cities and stuff and where you should kind of where everything is. So right now, it's just territories. Eventually, it'll be cities and states. Not every city and state, don't get me wrong, but like the main ones, right? Like you need to know where San Francisco is. You need to know where St. Louis is. I know DC. So like it'll be stuff like that a little later. And then 3 simple questions. Explain one cause of the Mexican-American War, explain one effect, and then explain another effect. Identify and explain for all 3 of those. So 3 identify and explains, easy peasy. You got about 15 minutes left in the class. So what I'm going to do now is stop sharing my screen.